2020 was the worst. And this time, I'm not joking. I mean, we got this pandemic, the movie theater catastrophes, the election things, wildfires, some health issues. Yep, it wasn't a good year. Okay, truth to be told, I'm not gonna deny that there are some good things that came out, at least for me. But everyone is saying that 2020 is technically kind of like the worst year of their life. I'll say that it's one of them, but some personal things that happened to me that kind of lessens the blow. But in this case, we're gonna talk about movies, in which, yeah, I agree that this wasn't a very good year considering the things that happened. Still, at least one of the benefits that happened is that making both the best and the worst movies of the year, it came out much easier compared to the other years. And honestly, I don't know what is into me that I usually come to pick up some of the worst, both in streaming and in movie theaters. Is that again there is kind of like a charm on watching bad movies and then criticizes and come up and play it like that, kind of like a pretentious know-it-all that just gives out an opinion of why you hate this movie, why you dislike this movie. Sometimes I get intrigued, and especially hearing other people's reviews and technically sharing your thoughts about it. Sometimes because when you come out as giving some positive, you come out as being kind of like overly positive or preachy, but also when you come out as negative, you kind of come out as kind of smart, but at the same time, you kind of come out like a sour guy. But, nevertheless, I have to tell you that this year, I did come up with some of my worst movies of the year. And I had an easier time seeing which one was bad. Even though not all of them was horrible that made me angry. Although there are some that it did make me angry, and I'm not gonna lie about that. Just hear me ramble. But unlike my best movie of the year, I had lots of bad movies enough to actually have my dishonorable mentions. So before I start out with my top 10 worst movies of 2020, how about let's go with the traditional honorary mention. Because, Lord, that there are some movies that I wanted to put on the list, but I couldn't. But like always, I have to put three dishonorable mentions. So let's go with it. My first dishonorable mention is for a movie that somehow is pitiful. The New Mutants. I want to. This movie could easily be in my top 10, but I found out some worst cases. In the case of the New Mutants, I didn't get a little bit of the heart to put it on my top 10 list, mostly because I feel pity of it. It's a movie that it had an idea of making kind of like a horror movie, a horror superhero movie, centered on the X-Men universe, but only to be delayed, I think, like years, because I saw the trailer and I was like, what the hell happened? This movie was supposed to come out, and when it came out, it felt like nobody wanted to pay attention to this movie. It was just something that was left on the shelf. They think that was a bad idea, and the only opportunity that they took is right after, at least in my case, the movie theater started to open. And it's one of the most emo-center Twilight fanfic style movie I have seen. It's kind of borderline depressing and soulless. But considering how much he had to go through, I just kind of gave it kind of like a pity dishonorable. Still, that doesn't excuse that is a bad film with really unlikable characters, a very messy editing, messy pacing, boring situations, boring characters, and so much that it feels outdated for something that people begin to think that being a teenager is all just being emo or just I'm just brooding and everything. No, I mean I like some broodiness on some characters. I mean, for example, in Sonic's case, I like Shadow the Hedgehog, but this movie needed a little bit of a ray of sunshine. My second dishonorary mention is Fantasy Island. This one also should have been on my higher, but I needed some space. Movie that they wanted to take a horror version of the TV series that I didn't watch. But I do remember that when I was watching this film, I was mostly mesmerized on how much exposition heavy this film is, and a lot of the characters are like blah blah blah. We said about this character here, having their the trying to go on with their own fantasies, but then it was like, no, I kind of regret it. I was like, these people tend to be really, really stupid. I honestly also really dislike this whole vanilla theme of the this girl who fantasizes on having revenge on her bully, only for in her last minute saying that, no, I'm too kind, I want to cancel it. No, you're gonna complete your fantasy. No, and somehow they say somehow it felt unearned. That is until and of course we got these bros. The bros are kind of like a hit or miss thing that it kind of comes unintentionally funny. That's what's part of how I remember. There is also this woman who who kind of has regrets of a love life, and some of the things that that felt kind of boring. Michael Pena, I know that he did his best, and honestly, there is kind of like a twist there that it comes as really stupid, and the whole angle comes as kind of like they didn't even know what to do for that. It was really stupid, and I heard rumors that there was kind of like a pilot for a TV series, but if that's the case, sign me out. This is not a fantasy that is worth chasing. Now my number 3. My number 3, I have to tell you something that this, I had to cut it some slack because on my review I was kind of come off as giving my opinion coming fresh out of it, but after thinking through with myself, after watching so much reviewers, and then kind of like, you know what, I think they do have a point. So I began to reconsider, but I didn't put it too high because there are some elements that I like, but I wanted to be a little bit fair, not just for me, but also for other people. So this is why, after much thinking, I decided to give my dishonorable mention to Wonder Woman 1984. One of the things that kind of blinded me of some of the flaws that this movie has is mostly kind of like the excitement that I had of going to the best movie theater that I recur before the pandemic, and I felt like kind of like excited to watch it. You know, it's kind of like a dumb superhero movie, even though I do have my gripes with the DC universe. And still, some of the things that I said on my review still holds up. Still holds up, but the more I think about it, this movie comes off as really kind of like badly edited and with some bad decisions and lots of plot twists that I didn't. That luckily there's some other reviewers that I like to watch, and there's some things that, oh man, I didn't notice this. Or there are some things that I kind of struggle to how can I say, express. And basically it made me realize, yeah, you know what? This movie is not that good as many people, as some defenders can say. I mean, there is the potential. There is the, having Wonder Woman trying to be, having to try to learn to be, well, now that I think about it, she kind of has to learn to let go of some of the things about the past, which kind of has nothing to do to be true to yourself. There is this okay performance of Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva / Cheetah. But unfortunately, she felt kind of like a sideline character, much like they did to Black Manta in Aquaman. Although I did enjoy kind of like the beginning, I had kind of like a guilty pleasure on mostly on the goofy aspect of the hijacking. There is this questionable thing about the of Chris Pine / Trevor plotline, in which yeah, they had chemistry, the chemistry, but then it kind of raises a lot of questions about this guy. But of course, there is Max Lord, the Max Lord plot, in which I finally realized that I didn't mention, but because it took me a while to see, is that basically the powers that he had is that he grants anyone's wishes, but then he's like, okay, but then you're gonna give me your most prized possession, and this is how he technically managed to control everybody. This is something that I failed to mention on my review, but then now that I finally get it, and the more I think about it, is kind of stupid. It's kind of stupid, and honestly, I still hold up that they could have done better, but they had to shoehorn in this kid, and the kid is kind of like this puppy-eyed dog kid that they just want to use it as a tool to say that, hey, this guy is not so bad, he has this past and everything, but man, this guy is irredeemable from the beginning, and kind of comes up a little bit too late, and sometimes children is not exactly the best way to solve the problem, especially when you come out with the end in which, out of nowhere, everything disappears, everyone is at world peace, out of nowhere. I basically kind of spoiled some of the movie, but at this point I don't care. But I still don't have the heart to 100% hate this film. At least not yet. But still it's enough to give it a little bit of a dishonorable mention, to give it justice to the people that wholeheartedly hated it. And now let's go with the official list. And here goes. Here is my top 10 worst movies of 2020. My number 10 is a movie that maybe I could give it some guilty pleasure, but you know what? It's still a trophy wife movie. Monster Hunter. based on the video game. Paul W. Anderson still can't help to show off his wife. And with that, he just take out video game movies. In this case, Capcom's Monster Hunter, a game that I never played, and have Mila Jovovich there, like always, showing how strong she is, and how awesome she is, how beautiful she is. But more than Mila Jovovich, the most I remember about this movie is chocolate. Yeah. If a movie that kind of makes me laugh about how goofy and overused the plot is about, you know, people from our world comes into the world of Monster Hunter, and it's kind of like a fish out of water story, but this time is Mila Jovovich, who she basically plays out the same character, even in the Resident Evil films. She's always the badass, overpowered character that has to struggle with everything, seeing everyone dies in front of her. She's basically almost the same person, and again, I don't think that she is a bad actress. She's actually good. She's a good actress for action film, but I wish to see her more competent films. And apart from his husband, in which her husband's, I'm sorry, she's trophy wife in my eyes. And let's not forget that this is based on a video game, in which, granted, some of the things it does justice, but kind of 80% of the movie, it takes place on the desert with two types of monsters. There's some homage here and there. Some of the characters are there. They have chocolate. And then finally, they meet up with more people, with more monsters. A little bit too late. There's this cat that I wanted to see more of that, but no. And also we got Ron Perlman dressed up as Dolph Lundgren casting for Conan the Barbarian. And the Rathalos, of course. We needed the Rathalos. It's just a Paul W. Anderson film that is bad. It's just bad, and people say that Sonic the Hedgehog is bad when it isn't. He's just the next Uwe Boll. But now let's continue on. My number 9 is basically the first movie I saw this year, and kind of prophetic in a way. The Grudge 2020. Oh man, that was one of the most inconsistent films I have seen. I mean, they wanted to take this horror IP from Japan. So one that I kind of barely knows. I only know the basics. I still need to watch the original, because I still remember the one with Sarah Michelle Gellar that I wasn't too fond of. But watching this one, it makes things worse. It basically felt like an anthology film that it was not written as an anthology. And I wanted to see it as an anthology, not like this mess about this detective. What was the name? Mackenzie Davis, I think it was called, the actress, who she wants to find the mystery about this house, and then we got kind of like the story of a couple that lives there expecting a baby, and there's also this couple in which the wife is kind of like out of her mind, and there's also kind of like this psychic woman. It's basically a mess, a total mess, and it still heavily relies on jump scares, which most Japanese horror films don't do that. They're more clever on showing atmosphere more than just boo or something that you don't even notice, not even in the poster. It's like, for example, some guy in the showers and for hands, like, here, let me help you out. Oh yeah, and let's not forget the it jumps from one era to another. It's so confusing, so boring, and there is also this ending, and it was like, what? Nothing. The only thing I will remember from this movie is that kind of like the police station, it has the number 666. Clever. Number 8. I can see some people technically saying that, dude, that wasn't too bad. No. This movie was so bad. But more than that, it was disappointing. Scoob. I'm not exactly a big fan of Scooby-Doo, but I was willing to give it a chance because some people technically tend to consider the first movie or the second movie kind of like a guilty pleasure, that it has a cult following. Not for me. I find these movies kind of like hideous. I don't like the 3D effects, and a lot of the humor doesn't mesh. But that's probably me because because even as a kid, while I did enjoy and watch Scooby-Doo, I wasn't exactly a fan of it. And this one, it felt more, Scoob was more like a corporate soul marketing ploy that it wanted to create a cinematic universe of the Hanna-Barbera IP, but it fails. It fails not just as a Scooby-Doo movie, but as a movie itself. I didn't feel anything. The jokes didn't land. They wanted to be modern. There is of course this new Blue Falcon and Dynamite, which are kind of like their roles reversed, and one is extremely annoying, and the other is extremely an asshole. And they have this, and also they have this female character that has no purpose. But you know that Warner Brothers is getting too much on this agenda thing that I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but you can notice it. And again, Warner Brothers is so desperate to create a cinematic universe like the Marvel Cinematic Universe that they wanted to incorporate, that it really felt like they wanted to put up as much as Hanna-Barbera character but no, you got the Scooby Gang, Dynamite, and of course, Dick Dastardly and Mudley. And unfortunately, this Dick Dastardly, I didn't felt anything for a Dick Dastardly. Oh yeah, and there's a Captain Caveman, which has the most miscast voice I have heard. That movie was embarrassing and soulless and didn't even know what to do. And if you enjoy it, fine. But for me, Scoob is it's just soulless. It's just a soulless film and just a marketing ploy. And this is something because I didn't say anything about the Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo movie that I just saw this year, which in part it was a horrible film, but liked it slightly than Scoob. So you gotta be proud of that. My number 7 on worst movie of the list of the year is none other than Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Or Birds of Prey Harley Quinn, whatever you want to name it. Oh my jeez. I remember that this movie, they wanted to push it hard by saying that, yeah, here's your Harley Quinn movie with Margot Robbie, and you're gonna see that chicks can kick ass, she can be independent and everything. I wouldn't have minded if it wasn't, if the agenda wasn't that aggressive. And by the way, what ballsy to you to call a superhero film when basically Harley Quinn isn't a superhero. She's basically an anti-hero, for lack of better word, or more accurately, a tragic villain. Yeah, she's a tragic villain, and I know she's a fan favorite. I like her too. But you know what? I don't think that Margot Robbie is a good Harley Quinn. No, I never, even after Suicide Squad, I never bought her as Harley Quinn. Never, ever. Many people say that she's a good Harley Quinn. No, she's not. I think she restrains a little bit too much in order to become up to be Harley Quinn. And this movie didn't help out, considering that Harley Quinn kind of occupies only 50% of the film. It tries to be hip. Saying that she's kind of like this crazy character that everyone is after her because she broke up with the Joker and all these things. Cute. Yeah, it's cute. But something about it feels missing. And because honestly, it wanted to be kind of like a cartoon. And I already said that the biggest difference between an animated cartoon and a live action that wants to be a cartoon is that they're not stretchy or not charming enough in order to imitate one from the other. And it doesn't help that the movie technically it centers on this. I think it was Cassandra was her name. I don't remember that character. She's a very unlikable character. There's Black Canary that she's unremarkable. There is Huntress, which is totally wasted. The whole thing about Harley Quinn saying that she wants to be independent from Joker and she wants to be herself, as to prove that girls don't need a man or everything. It kind of shows that she's still kind of not just needing for Joker, but it's kind of depending on the Joker's reputation. Which thank goodness Jared Leto it doesn't appear. But I don't know why the stupid guys from Warner Brothers want him back. Oh, and by the way, but if there's one thing fun but also horrible about this film, is Ewan McGregor basically overacting at the maximum. That he plays I don't remember the name of the character, but he basically is out of character, out of what people know him from the comics, but the way he acts is almost like he overdosed in cocaine. And he goes screaming out of his mind. That is just hilarious. Oh yeah, and also there's Sass, and boy, that is a disservice for the fans. So I don't care what people say. Harley Quinn was a terrible film in my eyes. Next on my list, number 6, The Witches 2020. A Roald Dahl film that it had some ambition but it didn't have the execution. I mean, it's basically the lost episode of Everybody Hates Chris. I understand what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a movie that had a little bit more cultural significance by setting it up in Alabama with an African-American cast, which is a good idea, at least on paper. It's a genius idea. But unfortunately, having Chris Rock had given out, this asset like I did on my previous show, it kind of comes out a little bit out of place. While the acting of the kids are fine, and Octavia Spencer does okay, you can't buy too much with the whole setting and the special effects. That for me, it looks really, really bright and too fake for my liking. I mean, the movie, and yeah, there's also the CGI is really, really, really bad. Okay, not exactly, bad as saying the kind of like the worst CGI. It's just saying that it looks so fake. And also, but of course, I didn't get to it. What makes this movie just sink? thanks to one person, Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway technically is chewing the whole scenery. She basically is like, come on, my children, gonna get you! She is basically desperate to win a Razzie Award. And my God, give it to her. Give it to her because she is awful on her acting. And let's not forget that the makeup is not very good. Well, makeup, quote unquote, because it's all CGI, making them look like Tarkatas. Man, it all falls flat. And there's also the Bruno character that they treat him very harshly. So much that he has a cruel ending compared to the book and the other movie. There is this girl Mouse that they add, in which she's practically useless. They only add her because, again, Warner Brothers wanted to show that girls can do anything, or they needed kind of like a female protagonist, even if they needed to shoehorn in for whatever reason. Look, I'm not trying to be that kind of guy. And the movie just, the more it goes, it falls apart, and so much that it leads to this genocidal ending that I was like, what the hell is going on? So much that after the movie, I had to watch the original movie, the other one, and the original fares a million times better. So this is a really, really, The Witcher 2020 feels too safe. It didn't have the teeth to go to darker territory. It felt like, oh yeah, I wanted to make a kids film. There is no such thing as kid film. Do it right. And honestly, of course, I don't know. Probably this movie could be, considering that this is produced or directed by Robert Zemeckis, I can tell if this is worse or a little better than Mars Needs Mom. I'll let you decide. And now let's go. My number 5 on the list. Oh, ho, ho, ho. It's Doolittle. Here's a funny story. I was about to forgive this film with the first time I watched it. I was like, okay, it's a dumb film. I see that it's kind of dumb. There was some ambition out of it. But if you see my review, it was the moment that when I mentioned about that in the trailer, in which we see kind of like Robert Downey Jr. having this kind of like this epic win or something like that. The moment I mentioned that this moment is because of having Robert Downey Jr. being farted by a dragon. The reaction that you see me doing like this is 100% genuine. And it was during that point in which I was like, why I was defending this film? It was kind of like, it took one moment to come to my senses and realizing that I didn't see a good movie. And the more I began to, remember it, is bad. It was bad. And it took the fart of a dragon to come to my senses. Personally, I love dragons. I'm a big fan of dragons. I will marry one if I could, but exaggerating. But not like this. Not like this. So I did remember that a lot of the flaws that this movie has. First of all, it's high budgeted and doesn't feel like a high budget film. It feels like too much CGI involved into it. Then we got Robert Downey Jr. in which after finally removing his shackles from the Marvel films, he went to do this kind of like this, kind of acting like this. What was it? Jack Sparrow-like character, who would like being so overly eccentric, and kind of embarrassing. Then there's this plot, and then there's the animals who doesn't shut up. There's this squirrel that he's up to have his revenge on the kid who basically saves his life, and he goes to do some logs, and out of nowhere gets a change of heart. Boy, that just feels annoying. Plots come out of nowhere. It's this unremarkable story. Again, people look. I hearing people that they have a big problem with the colonoscopy of a dragon. Which, if I have to defend a little bit about this, sorry about the cars. This is something that veterinarians have to do almost a lot of times. Sometimes when you're and considering that he's a doctor, sometimes when you do doctor things, you have to do nasty things. And again, colonoscopy is not is basically nasty. Nobody wants to see it. I understand it. Although this is what didn't affect me. Actually, it didn't affect me just thinking that they only had this moment, and also this moment to have him getting his fart on his face. It's all for gags, and really, really lame gags. There's a lot to talk about this film, but honestly, when I think about it, I kind of begin to prefer the boring-ass old film, and which also was a catastrophe, than this one. How is it that we live in a world in which they tried 2 Dr. Dolittle movies, and both of them, they fail? It's technically a marvel of science when you think about it. Okay. And now, let's go with my number 4. My number 4, it made me realize why I hate Disney Plus. I'm talking about Artemis Fowl. Oh, I heard that this movie was in development hell. Still, there are some movies that went through development hell and come out as becoming cult classics. Some do, some don't. This is one of those that don't. Because basically it's a movie that they wanted to center about this kid. Who basically they say that this kid is a genius. He's kind of like the most wonderful thing in the world. But the kid lacks charisma and does almost absolutely unremarkable. Almost the whole thing is just kind of like a hostage situation on a house. There is this kind of it is technically just wanting him to retrieve this artifact that is kind of inside the house, but nobody knows where it is. There is this kind of like this quote-unquote war between Artemis Fowl, his butler, and elves that have wings that kind of looks more like pixies. And they have this. Artemis Fowl grabbed this elf as a hostage. Nobody acts well. The CGI is kind of bad. And there's this Josh Gad that really looks like Hagrid, having this special, which apparently he's a gnome that can open his mouth like, which basically he eats dirt and shit out of his ass. and this thing goes on and on and on, and for a film that wants to feel magical, doesn't look like it. I was bored out of my tears of looking at this, and when they try to make humor, it falls flat. it had this Josh Gad character narrating the whole thing, saying that Artemis Fowl, he's a great kid. He didn't do dick. There's a lot to say about this film. Also, the goals of this movie to have the main protagonist call itself criminal mastermind when he didn't even commit any crime. The only crime that this movie did is basically just making a lousy movie. I never read the Artemis Fowl movies. I didn't read the Artemis Fowl books, and this movie didn't help. So pretty much, this kind of shows that, well, Disney can't do live action. If it is not a remake, it is a lousy movie. So let's continue on. Alright, now we are in my top 3 worst movies of the year. My number 3, oh boy, this is another January movie that was kind of surprising for me. That movie is The Turning. Yeah. This movie, it kind of baffles me the more that I think about it. And you know what? I knew that this movie was going to be bad the first time I saw the poster, because once I see that it's about a horror movie in which it's going to have creepy children, I knew that this is a recipe of a horrible movie. Because again, I technically don't like the creepy children stereotype that happens in horror movies, in which every time there's this cutesy children, and because of their innocence, they're technically excused for doing whatever they want, even creepy things. But this movie is kind of like a special place of badness, because, how can I say, this movie had this woman who goes get a job at the nanny on this big mansion with there's a woman living there and also 2 children. One of them being what was it, the Stranger Things kid, Finn. God damn it, we got a little girl that he kind of acts too cutesy for her own good, and there's this. And also there's the kid, again, the Stranger Things kid, who acts like a total sociopath to her for almost no reason, or sometimes reasons that are, that are nothing to do with it, or I don't care for it because I kind of forget this movie. But every single moment that this woman, she's like, "Fuck you kids, I'm out of this house," she never does, because she has this pinky promise to this little girl. And see what I'm telling you, sometimes cuteness can be either something that I like, or something that it can be used against it. But another thing that makes this movie so special and being one of the worst is that it feels like a big giant setup that it almost leads to almost nothing. There's a lot of typical psychological horror, but not as clever, because there's some jump scares that you might be thinking, okay, where this movie is leading on? You want to get some answer about what is happening. But at the end, guess what? For almost in the first time in my life, I've seen a movie that practically is unfinished. Because for all this build-up, then we get to the climax that basically doesn't exist. And it just ends. It's almost like they didn't even have an ending. I remember that there was like, what? That's all? bad movie that I've seen, and not in a good way. This it's the first time in my life that I've seen a movie that just came out technically unfinished. So this could easily be a number one, but there are two more that basically I just have to judge it which ones kind of feel like a technical bad movie, and the other two that basically pisses me off. And for this leads us to my number 2 worst movie of the year. And this one, I just had to put it, not because it is a horrible movie, but it's also because this kind of shows kind of like the horrible side of a beloved company. The movie I'm talking about is that my number 2, Mulan, the remake, 2020. You just seen my review. This was kind of like a long due movie that, even after hearing a lot of the controversy, I just felt so curious to watch it. And I got it in a red box, and from what I got, I can see a movie that is kind of like more of a corporate zombie compared to Scoob, because at least for the benefit of the doubt of Scoob, they did try something creative story-wise. They did screw it up. By being kind of like a soulless wannabe of something that it didn't want it to be. This one, on the other hand, Disney had a lot of faith on this film, and it kind of showed that it kind of turned into a slave of the Chinese market, so much that it didn't help out that with the main actress spouting out a controversial tweet. And then people began to boycott the film for good reasons. But I wouldn't boycott because of the Chinese stuff. I would like to have boycotted because of being a Disney remake of a beloved classic. And then of course there was this bullshit of that because they couldn't release it on movie theaters, they had to charge $30 in Disney Plus. Didn't help out. And ignoring all these aspects, what do we give us? A really, really feminist movie on the bad side of the feminist movement that it tried to appease so much to the Chinese market, ignoring a lot of the fallacies of the Chinese legend, because it is a beloved ballad. And again, it feels like a copy-paste movie that, well, it kind of had this excuse that it's going to be so serious, but it then come off as really emotionless and kind of dry. It is good looking, but it kind of missed the point of what made the Ballad of Mulan special. Hell, even for the sake of the animated movie, it misses the mark. So much that I had to rewatch it, and honestly, I rewatched the animated film, and boy, that even for the sake of fantasy, it holds up a lot better compared to this one. There's a lot of things that about honor that it feels misplaced. There's this phoenix that is so pointless. There is this witch that this witch is kind of like a walking Me Too movement. God, I don't like saying much of this, but you know what? I had to confront this. And it technically tends to lead to almost nothing. And although Mulan being powerful because of her chi kinda doesn't mesh well with the story. This is kind of like an essay. I mean, you just see my review. It's technically kind of like an hour long of me ranting the whole thing, and people are creating essay longs showing why this movie doesn't work. So basically, not just me. I'm jumping on the bandwagon of saying that this could be easily the worst movie of the year, even though some people are saying that there are worse movies than that. But you know what? I'm not afraid to say that Mulan is at least my second place the worst movie of the year. So if because of this horrible things that are showing from the Disney company, there is one that pisses me off personally. That movie, it made me so angry that I can't believe that it's not a Disney movie. But it was my fault because that was a day that was bored. We were having this pandemic, and I decided to watch a movie that I shouldn't have watched because it's not my genre. But curiosity killed me. I don't even have to read my list because it's still here. My number one worst movie of 2020. Oh my god, guys. Of all the Mulans and all the turnings and all the scoops and all the Monster Hunters, one movie pissed me off and made me so angry and so miserable. That movie is The Lovebirds. God damn. God damn. This is a movie in which our two characters are the epitome of their stereotypes that they belong to. And this kind of cemented my reason why I hate rom-comedies. Because rom-comedies is always these people who loses their common sense to create some of the most bullshit situations that you could ever see. And it didn't help that there are two unlikable beings. They don't shut the fuck up! God! So unfunny. I mean, seriously, this couple who were going on a breakup because people say that these guys, they love each other even though these two they feel like they don't have chemistry. It's a forced chemistry. And they end up on a situation in which they get quote-unquote hijacked by this guy who hijacked their car, ran over another dude, and what easily could have been saying that our car has been hijacked by this stranger, and this guy run over this other man, killing him. But no, they didn't do that. They just went on this wacky rom-com situation to even kind of end up in this kind of like cult. They find this cult, and even the movie acknowledges saying that we got cameras. I mean, we were looking for you not to arrest you, but to ask you some questions. But why they didn't do it? Because, or else you're not gonna have a movie. That kind of proves how lazy the writing was. And again, goddamn, shut the fuck up, guys. These two, God, this woman, this guy. I don't buy their romance. I don't buy what happened. The twist, the climax and the twist is so stupid. I can't believe that I watched that. Because honestly, I needed at least one movie to top it off. But, and in this moment, if there's something that I'm glad to end 2020, is that I hope that this movie is going to be erased from my mind. And for that sake, the king of the worst movie of the year, at least in the blogging Plaza, goes for the lovebirds. Congratulations, you pieces of ass. Now, sew your mouths. I don't want to hear you yap again. Okay, we finally ended. We finally reached our end of 2020. Things are still working right now, and the only thing that we have to do is to keep our hopes up. We have to keep up positive, even if 2021 is gonna be still, having this problem. We gotta endure it. Humanity has endured a lot of problems, and even biological problems. So we gotta keep out strong, and let's hope that 2021 is gonna be a better year than this one. And the little things of goodness that we had in 2020, we're gonna cherish. We're gonna cherish it. I managed to see my parents during this year, so this is why I cannot say that 2020 is basically the worst year of my life. So let's cheer up, guys. We can manage this together and for ourselves when we have our strong wills. So goodbye 2020. Let's keep our hopes for 2021. See you next year, guys.